You're watching the Stetson Law Channel. Welcome to Stetson Law Live, an online, interactive, informational event for prospective students of Stetson University College of Law. Your host today, Carmen Johnson, and her guest, Darren Kettles, and Carla Davis Jameson. Our topic today, the JD admission process.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. You are watching the Stetson Law JD admissions process. We're happy that you've been able to join us today. We're going to introduce ourselves and then we're going to get right into the content, and hopefully you find the information helpful. My name is Carmen Johnson. I'm the Associate Director of Admissions and Diversity Initiatives here at Stetson Law. And then my colleague.
And I'm Darren Kettles. I'm the Director of Admissions here at Stetson Law School, and I've been here for about 12 years, and we are happy that you are joining us from all over the country by the looks of things. So yes. Thank you for taking a few minutes to join us today.
And wonderful. I'm just so happy to see people are posting in the chat log already. We're seeing people from Fort Lauderdale, Dallas, Kentucky. So wonderful. I'm happy to see all of you, and just feel free to keep posting. To introduce our chat log feature, yes, this is what you're seeing. This is where you're able to engage with us as we're talking about the JD admissions process. And running our chat log room is our Assistant Dean of Strategic Enrollment Management, and is Dean Davis Jameson. So she is the one that you're going to be speaking with in the chat room, and she'll be giving some great information there as well, okay? So Darren, today we're here. Can you just talk about the purpose of this webinar and what information we're getting ready to share?
Sure. So we looked at, the options and trying to come up with something that's going to be really helpful and beneficial for your short period of time with us. So we're going to kind of just go over the entire admissions process. We're going to let you know what our last class looked like, so you get some idea of the range of our applicants, the quality of the applicant pool that we had, and who actually matriculated here. So hopefully that'll be helpful to you as well. And we want to take your questions, because while we can talk about this endlessly, you don't always know right from an admissions office, their perspective, things that can help you and be beneficial to that process. So we want to get to all your questions as well. But just before we get started, we thought we'd talk a little bit about, Stetson, just briefly, who we are. For some of you, we might have met you on the road this past fall recruiting season. Hopefully we have. For some of you, we're just getting to know you now. So thank you for your interest in Stetson Law School. So for some of you, you might know that Stetson is the oldest law school in the state of Florida. It was founded in 1900 on the main campus, which is just in DeLand, Florida, north of Orlando. We actually moved from the main campus here in 1954 and have been here in the Tampa Bay Metro since. So we're one of the best situated law schools in the state of Florida, because we're pretty much the only game in town. There is a satellite campus of a Michigan-based law school on the other side of Tampa. But for the most part, we've really sort of controlled this particular metropolitan area. And it's served us well. Stetson actually has had the highest employment rate for the past few years in the state of Florida regarding our employment numbers. It's a growing, robust community. It's a wonderful place to live and to study. But we're also located on a beautiful campus, which was an old resort hotel. So we're separate from our undergraduate school, and a lot of undergraduates, or a lot of law schools actually, are one building on the undergraduate campus, and we are completely separate. So hopefully you'll plan to come and visit if you haven't already. We actually would invite you to come. So reach out to our office if you ever want to attend a class and maybe meet with a faculty member, or maybe other members of our community, the administration, or even some of our current students. So you're always welcome here. So please feel free to reach out in that regard.
And absolutely, as we get further into the information, one of the things that we'll continue to emphasize is that this is just the start of a conversation for many of you. Some of you have already interacted with us, so we'll get to as many questions as we can as we go through our various tips and inside tips for the application process. But always remember that you're more than welcome and encouraged to reach out to us individually with questions. We can set up phone appointments. And of course, as Darren mentioned, we can also schedule a campus visit. And so one of the first things that we like to go over with you is our class profile. A big part of the admissions process to any law school, including Stetson, is going to be, what was the previous class profile like? And that can have implications in terms of insight about what the type of applicants we are looking for. So we're going to show the first couple of slides here. And right now, what you are seeing is our part-time class profile. And I will say there's a lot of information here, but definitely wanted to paying attention to a lot of our common questions about is going to be about the median GPA, our median LSAT score. So as you can see, the median GPA is a 3.29. The median LSAT score is a 154. Now, Darren and I are going to go through a lot of information about GPA, LSAT score, but this is just giving you a nice snapshot, okay? And now you see a slide with our full-time program profile, and our part-time entering class was around 45 students. Full-time, as you'll see, is around 239 students who enrolled in fall 2018. And that median GPA 3.37 and the median LSAT score is a 155. So in general, the rule of thumb is that you try to achieve those medians to be most competitive for admission. And again, we're going to go into more information about that. But go ahead, Darren. Did you have some thoughts?
I was actually just going to mention that last year we had about 2,000 applications for our incoming class. So just sort of building on what Carmen just said regarding the 25th to the 75th. I mean, look at that range. I mean, while we have solid medians and stuff, look at what the range is between the 25th and the 75th. To give you some idea, you don't always have to fall dead on with our median in order to be competitive in every incoming class. And we don't always know what it's going to look like, the applicant pool. But thankfully, we've enjoyed a really good quality applicant pool, and hopefully you are working hard on your applications, getting where they're going to be not only competitive for admission, but also for scholarship, because who doesn't want money?
Yes.
That's right.
We will definitely talk about that today as well. Thank you for bringing that up. So what we're going to do is we're going to continue to talk a little bit about the process. I see some outstanding questions coming in. Dean Davis Jamison is already addressing some of your questions. And so what we'll do is continue to go through the process. And as I see questions that are similar to what we're referring to or what we're talking about in the process, we'll definitely address those questions, and things that we're able to get to towards the end of the presentation, we'll definitely do that as well, okay? So for the next slide that we're going to show is going to basically, one of the top things about the application process is going to be the timeline, okay? Darren, for the most part, can you kind of go over the timeline and why it's so important to a law school applicant?
Oh, for sure. So, I mean, we did open our application on October 1st of this year for fall 2019. Stetson actually enrolls one class a year every fall. So for those of you that are close to submitting an application, maybe some of you have submitted an application already to not only Stetson, but to other schools. Most people on average apply to about 6 or 8 law schools, but your timeline is actually really good. I mean, it used to be that, the quality or some of the better quality or the prepared applicants sometimes applied earlier on in the process. But we've actually seen that extend well into the new year. But that doesn't mean you should delay your application by any means. We're not saying do that. But by all means, know that your timeline at this point is good. A lot of people will go home during the holiday break and plan to submit their application, complete some of the final aspects that they're just awaiting there in that regard. But we do have a priority scholarship deadline as well. And so for those of you that are wondering about scholarship and when the best time is for you to get your application in, our priority scholarship deadline is March the 15th. And for those people that are actually wondering whether or not they'll have money at certain timelines or parts of the timeline, we feel confident that by March 15th, if you're getting your application in, that we still have actually a robust scholarship amount pool to award at that point. Not that you can't get scholarship past that, but we just always encourage people to be timely, because Carmen and I can talk about last year, we had some people that were just really good quality applicants that would have otherwise qualified for more scholarship if they'd gotten their application in earlier. So, so I do want to encourage that, but, do the best you can. We recognize that people, sometimes they have limitations in their time, but do your best to get your application in as timely as possible. So,
And I'm seeing quite a few questions, and thank you for all the questions that are coming in. Seeing quite a few questions about the application applying before you get an LSAT score. Is that allowed? Is that encouraged? We also had some of you submit that question in advance. And I believe Alyssa is asking a similar question as well. So Darren, should they apply before getting an LSAT score?
Yeah, no, in fact, I actually got a few of those emails today, or was responding to them anyway. For those people that are wondering about, okay, can you submit an application before you've actually taken the LSAT? Maybe you're scheduled to take the January test. I mean, a lot of people do, with the idea that they can submit their application, they can have their application be processed in the interim. If we need something, we need clarification from a particular area of your application, we have time to reach out and have your application complete, and we're just awaiting the score. As an applicant to Stetson, your score, once ready and postable, it will automatically come to us. So you don't have to worry about whether or not or how quickly that's going to be transferred. It will come to us, and we actually run reports, and if you want to reach out and make sure that we got it, that's fine. But for the most part, we're aware of who's actually taking a future test, and we actually do a good job about rounding up those applicants to complete and review and get a decision on your application. So.
And I'm also going to bring in a very quick topic, and then we can go on and talk about the application process and the components of the application. Sure. But I'm seeing some questions from Anya, Alyssa, and I think perhaps Phil a little bit earlier as well. In regards to the scholarship process, that timeline, yes, our scholarship priority deadline is March 15th, and it's a priority deadline. It does not necessarily mean that those who apply after that date are going to lose out on scholarship opportunities. If the funds are available and a candidate qualifies, we would definitely try to consider those individuals for scholarship opportunities. And another thing I saw few questions about when it comes to scholarships is generally what is that range of LSAT score? Because we talked about how to get admitted and what we're typically looking for, and that's a wide range, but scholarship range, typically what are we looking for when it comes to scholarship qualification?
Yeah, so I mean, we try to actually do an equitable job to award scholarship to as many applicants as we can. In fact, last year's incoming class was over 80% of our incoming class came in with scholarship. So we've offered anything from just a few thousand all the way up to full tuition and pretty much everything in between. Based on merit, undergraduate GPA, LSAT score, character and fitness as well. Stetson is quite strict when it comes to character and fitness. Of course, we're not perfect either, and neither are our applicants, but do your best to disclose everything. If you're wondering about disclosing something particular in your file, by all means reach out and we can always have that conversation. But in terms of the ranges, we want to make sure we bring in the strongest academic and otherwise with lots of inclusion and diversity as much as possible. So it's always hard to say where we stop and start in terms of the awarding, but you saw our ranges. You saw those kind. If you're in those kinds of ranges, typically you are going to be in a strong candidate for not only admission but for scholarship. But every application cycle is a little different. So we will do our best to make sure that we award scholarship to all those candidates who we believe can add value to our incoming class and to the future of this institution.
Sure. And Jessica, I believe we addressed your question. If we need to go over it again, please feel free to type in again, but I think we went over that as well. All righty. So last thing, Tori asked the question, do gap years make an applicant look weaker? It's still related to the timeline topic.
Yeah. So we love it when people actually take a bit of time just to confirm that they, in fact, want to do this. For a lot of people, they want a little break from undergrad. Maybe they had a really tough academic program and they want to just have a little bit of break so they feel like they're ready. For others, they're ready just to keep going. They want to launch right into the next program. They feel like they're in a good timeline and they have their academics and their study skills in place. But for a lot of people, maybe they want to do Teach for America or the Peace Corps, for example, or if you just want to take a year off and work and save a little bit of money for law school, so you have some reserves out there. But I always tell people it's kind of a year on. So, I mean, I wouldn't recommend just, taking a year off so you can chill for a year. Have a plan. I mean, use that year wisely because it could be you maybe working for someone in Congress. Maybe you want to work at a law firm. Maybe you, in fact, want to get some experience in some area that you have never had prior to coming into law school. But all these things are highly favorable. So I would recommend taking a look at that. But don't think that you can't come right out of undergrad. A traditional applicant, they typically do. But a lot of people take a year, and it's just fine for our purposes as well.
Excellent. And we're seeing some questions come in about the individual application components. And so now that's going to be a wonderful transition to our next slide. And we've talked about the timeline, and we can continue to talk about timeline if you still have questions. But now we can transition in talking about actually the application process itself. First, we want to highlight a particular resource, which is lsac.org. LSAC stands for the Law School Admission Council. And that is a wonderful place for you to start to learn more about the application process. And there are particular two functions that's going to be important to you. For those who don't know yet, that is where you're going to create your CAS account, your Credential Assembly Service account, where you are going to submit your materials to law schools that you plan to apply to. And that is also where you're going to register for the LSAT exam. So lsac.org is going to be a wonderful resource. You'll also learn about how to prepare for the LSAT, along with tips that we're going to share with you today, okay? Then we can talk about the JD admissions checklist. And so if we can bring that slide back up, Stan, and there's going to be a total of 2 slides. And what we're going to do is kind of go through, and I'm seeing a lot of the questions. We're going to try to tie in some of the answers to your questions as we talk about the various components of the application. Okay. And so, Darren, I already kind of briefly covered the LSAC component and how you're registering. Did you have anything else you wanted to add to that, and maybe even start talking about the transcripts as well?
Oh, sure. So you did see on the top of that slide too, we actually have that checklist right on our website. So for those of you after today, if you want to just verify it, we did it in an internal document. So hopefully it was going to be there and helpful for you too. But I mean, there's about 6 or 7 components to putting together a law school application. You just want to make sure everything's as strong as you possibly can. Some people retake an Lsat here and there if they think they can improve the score. Some people apply, get admitted, they get scholarship, but they want to retake the Lsat. They think they can improve their score. So just know that while you're an applicant and you could have a decision, there's a lot of people that will update transcripts. They'll update letters of recommendation. They'll update LSAT scores, et cetera, during this process to try and continue to be as strong as applicant as possible and hopefully secure further scholarship. I've seen it happen time and time again. But so for those of you that haven't been to the LSAT website, the lsac.org is the parent organization for anyone applying to any of the ABA accredited law schools in this country. So everyone is required to go through this service, whether you're applying to 1 law school or you're applying to 10 law schools. It doesn't matter. Everyone is required. Your application comes to us from LSAC electronically. So you do have to register for the LSAT at the LSAC website. Those are offered 6 times a year now. If you are unaware, they did bump it up within the last few months up to 6 times a year. And the looks like they are trying to actually increase it even more. That's where you'll also register your CAS account, which stands for Credit Assembly Service. And really, you're just compiling your online application. So at this website, you will set up your JD CAS account, and that is actually where you'll compile your online application for any ABA accredited law schools that you will apply to in this country. So also in Canada, we're not talking about that today, but yeah, so that is a required service. So once you establish that, that's where you're going to funnel in your transcripts. So any transcripts from any institution you've attended that is an accredited institution that is accredited by a body that's recognized by the Department of Education. So that is required. So your CAS account, you're going to send in all your transcripts, whether you had 1 class at a community college, maybe you only took 1 class there, you're required to actually send in that specific transcript, even though it could be on your graduating degree conferring transcript from, the University of Central Florida, wherever you actually apply, you earned your undergraduate degree. So you can have any background, you can have any degree in any major that you choose. I mean, there are traditional majors, that's sort of true, but complete your transcript, take something that you want to study. Don't think you have to placate to the law school. Complete your transcripts, take the programming that you would like. Some people have majors in particular areas. Some people get a minor. If somebody's wondering about those kinds of areas with your transcript and you're unsure, study what you want to study. We're fine. Don't placate, again, to the law school and think, well, what would they like us to study? But I would encourage you to take a strong writing major in some aspects. For some of you, you might be a hard science major, but if you have an opportunity to take a minor, take something where there's a little bit of a stronger writing component to actually sort of bridge that, because your critical thinking skills will be all there intact, but sometimes you just don't get enough academic writing at that level. So transcripts, get them in. Although many of you might be applying while you're still in undergrad, that's fine. Apply at that current stage. Don't think you have to complete your degree before you have to apply. That's not true at all. We just need your final degree conferring transcripts by the time you matriculate in August.
And thanks for that. And we've also noticed quite a few questions about GPA. And so it's kind of related to the transcript conversation. So when it comes to the GPA, a lot of people have the question of how does the GPA impact the application? How much weight is that considered in the application process? And how can you overcome potentially a lower GPA? And as Darren mentioned, yes, you're going to be submitting all your transcript, but we always consider the GPA sometimes to be like the front cover of a book. Okay, it doesn't tell you the full story. And so there are a couple of strategies that you can utilize to somewhat overcome or to explain a lower GPA. And a couple of tips, and Darren can add if he has more tips as well. A couple of tips is going to be, we'll talk about addendums a little bit later, but before we get to that, really explaining what happened during that process. You're not necessarily providing excuses, but you're providing context of what may have been going on at the time when your GPA may have been a little bit lower. So there are going to be avenues where you can submit explanations and giving us some context about your experience. And then also another quick tip is to definitely when it comes to the lower GPAs, in many cases, there may be some opportunities for you to basically get in touch with us. Sometimes you can contact LSAC to make sure there's the correct calculation. They often don't miscalculate the GPA, but there's a way for you to get in contact with us and really submit those addendums to make sure that we have all the information and the context involved. Anything else to add to that?
In terms of the GPA, I mean, a lot of times people will start their undergraduate programs with an idea they wanted to maybe go to med school, which is, certainly a viable thing that you will want to pursue. But sometimes undergraduate programs are a way to determine what the best path is for you. So sometimes you start out in hard science and you realize that it's maybe not the direction you want to go. And so you can still pursue professional school. And the difference with law school is you can really have any major and go to law school. So for those people that switch from hard science to social science, and you want to give us context, maybe the physics classes or the calculus classes were a real challenge for you, they brought down a GPA, we get that. I mean, that happens. Just try to rebound in a way that's going to make you competitive, do the best you can. Once times grades are done, there's not a whole lot you can do about them. So we recommend focusing on the other things in your application that can help benefit and boost an application. And the LSAT could be another outlet for that.
Yeah, and definitely the LSAT tends to even have a little bit more weight than the GPA. So there's going to be a nice balance test for you there. So with the next step in the process, thank you, Dean Jamison. When it comes to the letters of recommendation, there's been quite a few questions about the letters of recommendation. And I think one of the biggest tips with the letter is, yes, 1 is required. A maximum of 3 will be accepted. So no more than 3. And a lot of people will feel the need to submit 3 letters just because they want to go with the maximum. And I think a good rule of thumb is to definitely try to submit a letter or have your recommender send a letter that's going to be strong. It's kind of like a letter of champion, not just recommendation. So I'd rather have 1 outstanding letter than 3 similar, probably mediocre ones. So again, if you have 3 outstanding letters to submit, go for it, but don't necessarily feel that you have to do so. And we definitely try to make it optional for you. And I believe we have a question from Andrew that we definitely want to get to cover. After your application is fully submitted, how long does it take for the admissions team to provide us with a response? That's a great question, Andrew.
Yeah, so for the most part, I mean, we have a pretty fast turnaround here at Stetson. We did open October 1st, so for people that applied right at the beginning of the cycle, most of you had your decisions within the first week of November. So we try and keep it in the 3 to 4 week range, depending on volumes. But overall, we do our best to keep that going. So if you haven't heard something after 3 or 4 weeks, there could be parts of the cycle where you could get a decision within a couple of weeks. We do our best to try and get a response to you. We know this is a really sort of stressful time. but it's also an exciting time too. So for those of you, if you have questions regarding that, I mean, if it's been 3 or 4 weeks and you haven't heard anything, by all means, let us know. I mean, hopefully that won't happen to you, but occasionally, some applications take a little bit longer to get a decision on, depending on the application. So.
For sure. And we'll continue to answer questions about letters of recommendation if needed. But looking at the clock, we want to make sure we keep going because a lot of questions are related to the personal statement. So in general, Darren, just what are some of your biggest, like a couple of tips about the personal statement? And then we have some specific questions that we can go over as well.
Yeah, sure. So the personal statement. For most people, that's probably one of a very challenging part of the application because you kind of have an opportunity to sort of have your own voice in a way. A lot of times the questions are very specific in terms of the other components of the Flex app and the Common app. But for the most part, this particular part of the application is going to be your voice. So let us know your reasons for wanting to go to law school. I mean, why Stetson even? This is a big deal. So most people just don't decide overnight that they want to do this. I mean, for some people, it's been maybe years in the process. For some of you, you've always known. For some of you, it was a recently planted seed for you, and now you are really wanting to pursue this. So, but let us know that. Let us know if there's been a series of steps. I wouldn't use the personal statement to address in an addendum. Maybe you want to address something specifically regarding your application. I would use an addendum for that. So, and really use your personal statement to really let us know why you've sort of come to this decision that you want to be an attorney and you want to practice law. And for some of you, you want to be a public servant. For some of you, you want to be legal counsel at an agency that's supporting something that you're really passionate about. And for some of you, you want to be great problem solvers in any aspect of your professional life. And I think a JD is fantastic for that. So there's a lot of reasons why people want to pursue this. We don't always know, but tell us. Make sure it's extremely well written. And this is one opportunity in the application where you have your voice. And just remember who's reading it too. I mean, it's usually professional colleagues, it's member of the faculty, they're reading it. So it's not your peers per se, it's members of professional community. So do your best to make sure it's professional and well articulated.
And that's excellent. And when it comes to the personal statement, yes, minimum of 2 pages, maximum of 3. So I think Dean Jamison was able to answer a lot of those questions in that regard. If you have additional questions, and I think there were some additional questions about particular LSAT scores versus, compared to particular GPAs, for those individual questions, we'll try to get back with you to answer that individually, but definitely feel free to reach out to us for more insight about that. I'm going to very briefly cover resumes. It's optional as part of the application process, but usually when something's optional, we put it in there because we really want to see it. We want to know more about you. And Darren is absolutely right when it comes to the personal statement. It gives them some great insight in terms of what's making you passionate as a future attorney. But the resume is giving us more insight about who you are, what you've been doing with your time. And that also kind of shows us what you've been passionate about as well. And I believe Brenda submitted a couple of questions about the resume. Yes, if you've done a variety of things, it can be pro se work. It can be jobs, internships. Put that in the resume and really allow us to get to know you in your activities. And Darren, really quick, a lot of people ask, you have the typical parts of the resume where you talk about your work experience or internship experience, but what about things like hobbies? How do you view that?
Well, I mean, the assumption that every single person has a whole entire career before they even apply to law school. I mean, for some people, they just got really engaged in their undergraduate program. Some people have worked, some people haven't. Some people were required to work to be able to afford their undergraduate programming. So some people will just have more on the resume than others. I know I had to work during undergrad, and some of you might relate really well to that. But some of you, you had an opportunity to be able to solely focus on your studies. And so for some people, that you got involved in organizations on campus that you were really passionate about. I mean, pick a few that you really, resonate with you. I mean, the assumption that everyone can do like 20 things really well. I mean, list things that you really have identified that kind of you learned a lot from. But in terms of the resume, if you don't have a whole lot to contribute, I mean, talk about what your organizations were on campus. Talk about what you do, what you've done in your spare time. If you've done any volunteer work, I mean, it tells us a little bit more of your story. But don't feel bad if you haven't, worked your entire time through undergrad, or maybe you had a summer job. Those kinds of things all show responsibility and just sort of gradually getting into professional life. So don't feel that you have to somehow have this elaborate resume. I mean, a lot of people enter law school and they are primed and ready for this experience, but yeah, they haven't done a whole lot with jobs, et cetera, too. So focus on things that you can tell us. Tell us if you've written certain materials for your program. I mean, elaborate on those. That could be a great area to do that. We don't want you to send in your dissertation because we don't have time for that. But for those of you that want to include that, let us know that you have in fact done that. I think that's helpful.
Sure. And I see that it's already 12:30. But what we're going to do is we're going to continue to go over some of these last few remaining questions. But if you are not able to stay with us any further, thank you so much for joining. We're going to keep going over questions and we'll be in contact with you afterwards.
Did we want to include the email address for Law Admit?
Yes.
For those of you who wanted to send it, if you didn't get a question answered, you can see it on the screen right now. By all means, send it to us. I mean, we'll do our best to get back to you today on that. I'll do my best. I don't know, Carmen, what do you think?
We'll do
our best to get back to those questions.
Yeah.
I got a little bit behind in my emails. I was at a conference this week, so if some of you are waiting on a response, please know that it will get responded to. I assure you.
Yes, and we'll definitely be on top of that. And so what we're going to do is going to continue the conversation in regards to addenda. Okay. If you have other resume questions, again, you can email us separately or you can continue to go over them. We're going to try to go for just a few more minutes to make sure we cover all the topics here. So for addenda, one of the biggest tips with the addenda is that is the place where you can address some of the items that may be of concern or that you feel we might be concerned about. So Darren mentioned earlier about the personal statement. That is the place for you to shine. The personal statement is not the place for you to talk about that low GPA or that concern about the GPA or a character and fitness issue, probably relating to any academic violations, what we call little mishaps, or in terms of criminal mishaps, if we want to call it that. Okay. A lot of people have them. That is the perfect location for in the addendum to discuss those. And again, not necessarily making excuses, but providing context. We all love context. So addenda can include academic addendum, LSAT addendum. Some people will submit addendums for that. Those are a little tough because you do have multiple opportunities to take the LSAT if needed. We will take your highest score. But one of the things about the LSAT addendum is if you were ill on the LSAT day and you plan on taking a future one, you can definitely feel free to let us know that. And then in addition to academic and LSAT addendum, the character and fitness, that is something that's going to be very important when it comes to your future bar application, whether it's for the state of Florida or for another state that you plan to practice in. We have students who go all across the country and even the world to go practice. So the addendum is a wonderful opportunity for you to do that, and you can attach it to your application separately. Any other advice about addendum?
I mean, I think it's really important that if you don't explain it, we'll kind of come up with our own reasons. So by all means, let us know. It doesn't have to be elaborate. We don't need pages upon pages of stuff. I mean, we're reading like 2,000 applications. So it's to give context to something. And I think if there are gaps in any of your education or full disclosure, if you're ever wondering, by all means, if you're ever in doubt, just fully disclose, because you can't be knocked for not doing that. Your application will want to be, you want it to mirror your bar application. You don't want anything that's kind of irregular happening. So because, I just got an email from somebody today that said it talked about like disclosing and we went back and forth too. And now the bar wants to see the amendment to that application, which was not put in the original one. So by all means, fully disclose. When in doubt, fully disclose. If you have changed majors, for example, and you want to let us know why the grades took a big jump because you finally got in a program that's really right for you, that's helpful to us. So it does give us context in that regard. So addendums are a great thing to explain anything in your application that you otherwise don't have a spot in the application. That's a great opportunity to do that.
And a common question that we receive about addenda is the opportunity to submit a separate statement that talks a little bit more about yourself. Some people refer to it as a diversity statement. Some people call it other things. Yes, we will accept those. If there are some additional insight that you would like to provide, again, there's going to be limited number of pages, probably no more than maybe 2 pages double spaced. Yes, we do accept diversity statements and we can value those. You don't have to call it a diversity statement. Some people talk about study abroad opportunities they've done, or if they've lived in the international community in some respects. There's so many different things you can discuss if you serve in the military. Those are usually going to be items that normally would not be appropriate for the personal statement, because the personal statement is asking you a very specific question. And as a good writer, you want to stay on topic with that question. That separate statement can sometimes be helpful for our people to kind of, just share a little bit more information about themselves. Again, while keeping it brief, it can be a great opportunity. One additional question, and I'm going to see if I can pinpoint a few other questions that we can kind of close out that kind of brings us back to things that we've already discussed. But one question was, Darren, I recently received my November LSAT score, as many of you probably have. I did worse than I did the first time. How does this look? And should I submit an addendum explaining what could have contributed to the issue?
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate when people spend a lot of work and they don't actually see it translate into their future efforts. So it does happen. Somebody emailed me earlier today to tell me that exact same thing too. And, I always encourage people to submit the strongest application possible, not because you think that you want to take the LSAT one more time, not because you think it's the most fun you'll ever have, but nobody's forcing you to go to law school. This is an elective process. And I do think that people need to consider maybe a future test, because sometimes, they were in the similar ranges, but it just didn't bolster their application as much as they had hoped. So I encourage them to consider the possibility of maybe taking a future one. But, if you want to explain it, if it's within a couple of points, I get it. If you want to include an addendum for that, I just don't think it's always necessary. Sometimes some test days are better than others. So, if you're in those ranges, typically when there are huge disparities between scores and you're really not sure, one was a good day or one was a bad day, or those things can be helpful. But when they're in close ranges, I know it's disappointing, but see if you can regroup and maybe do some identity, kind of identify what areas of the LSAT that you can improve a few more points on, and see what you can do to maybe consider a retest again too, because there's several options after the new year.
Mm-hmm. And I think I want to limit it to see maybe we can cover 2 more questions. I see a question from Naomi. Is there a limit on the number of addenda we can submit? That's a great question. While we talked about earlier how, yes, you can submit various addendum, there's not going to be an actual limit on the number of addenda you can submit, but within reason, right? This is your application. This is giving us insight as to who you are as an applicant, who you are as a person and as a future lawyer. So wanting to keep it within reason, with the understanding that there are going to be committee members as we're going over your application, wanting to make it concise, on topic, and not going too beyond the number of pages. Another question, and I'm Darren, if you can address this one.
Yeah.
I believe it's the one from Michelle. Can you address the attendance to an unaccredited law school that's perhaps not in the U.S.? Oh, unaccredited school, so undergraduate school. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Yeah. So in regarding transcript, we require all transcripts, whether they're accredited or unaccredited. I think it's in your best interest to fully disclose that. Some people took programs that were, in another country, or they were a trade school, et cetera, too. These could be all part of your resumes. But if they are, in fact, issuing grades and transcripts, we're going to require those transcripts. I think it's always better to disclose. So, make that your plan as well. So.
And then I think I'm going to make this the last question from, I saw it before from Elizabeth about addressing, low LSAT scores.
Yeah,
I think one of the things that we haven't necessarily gone over is when there are people struggling with the LSAT. A lot of people do. we'll emphasize that, yes, we do take your highest score. So we do encourage you to see if you can plan in advance to allow yourself the opportunity to take it more than once if needed. So if you know that you're getting ready to apply for fall 2019, that deadline is May 15th. Try not to wait for that last absolute exam that we'll accept in order for you to take the exam if needed. And then also, in terms of some of the resources that are available to help you prepare for the LSAT, lsac.org is going to be a wonderful resource for you to learn about the various opportunities for you to prepare. Darren, can you briefly talk about Khan Academy and when that started and its availability to students?
Yeah, sure. So, in fact, it was just earlier this year that LSAC had partnered with Khan Academy, which is named after Sal Khan, who created a lot of work. A lot of people have worked on it when they studying for the ACT, when they were doing those particular undergraduate admissions tests. But LSAC just recently partnered, and it's a free online program that's just been established. It started in June of this year. So I've talked to many students over this past recruiting cycle, and they talked about how valuable it was. So it is a free online LSAT prep program. By all means, check it out. Some people will find that really beneficial. Some people will find that they have to do their own self-study. Some people are just fine in that regard, taking a multitude of practice tests as they prepare for the LSAT. Some people will hire a tutor. Some people will actually consider another option like a Kaplan or Test Masters or Princeton Review or otherwise too. There's a multitude out there. By all means, we know they can be expensive, but if you do plan to pursue one, sometimes it has a huge payoff for people. It helps them get the kind of scores that are getting them admitted at a school they want and help them with scholarship money as well. So, yeah, I mean, everyone has their own way of doing this, but by all means, put in the time. Do not underestimate that test. It's a challenging test. Not that you can't answer the question, but you have to get your timing down. It's a big challenge if people haven't done that much work in that area. So,
wow, we have covered quite a lot of information. And
I know we missed some.
Yes, I know we missed some questions. We kind of talked about some things generally. We are taking a snapshot of this chat log. And so we will try, if we can identify you, we will try to reach out to you to answer some of those questions. If we did miss your question, again, the email address to reach us is at the bottom of the screen, lawadmin@law.stetson.edu. And we highly encourage you to please email us the question so that we can get back to you as quickly as possible. All right, so thank you so much for joining us. There are going to be a couple, Stan, I wanted to show one more slide. There are going to be a couple of things that we want to make sure we highlight for you all. And those are going to be some important dates. Again, if you are fall 2019 applicants, our scholarship priority deadline is March 15th. And if you need some information about that, if you would like to have a conversation about that, please be sure to schedule an email with us, especially if you're applying. It is okay for you to get in contact with us. That's what we're here for. And then, of course, our ultimate deadline is May 15th. And I also want to highlight our spring open house. It is going to be February 23rd, 2019, and registration is going to begin next month. That will be a wonderful opportunity for you if you were not able to join us for our November open house and are able to join us today. That's why we held the webinar today, because not everyone can come to our campus right away. I hope that you can join us for our February open house on the 23rd. And so please be on the lookout for that information. We will also send you additional links in the follow-up email to this webinar where you can continue to engage with us and learn about more of our upcoming events, okay? So, Darren, any final thoughts that you would like to share with our applicants or future applicants, excuse me?
By all means, spend a little bit of time with us. I mean, culture is a really big deal. I mean, most of you are going to apply to, 6 or 8 law schools on average. But by all means, come visit, go visit campuses, see what you like. You could like things on paper, you could go visit, you might not like it. We think we're pretty reflective of the culture of the school. Hopefully you've felt like it was a warm and friendly and inviting place. We spent a lot of time here. Carmen is actually a graduate of Stetson Law School too, so if anyone has any questions about that. And we've spent a lot of time here. So we know our community. We can always connect you with our community. Let us do that for you. I do think it's important. I think it could be really reflective of what your experience could be once you get into law school, because there'd be nothing worse than finding yourself at a place where you feel like nobody cares that you're there. And we feel confident that Stetson is a welcoming place and you can find an opportunity here to succeed and distinguish yourself.
And my final tip is going to be, I saw some questions about, various components of your experience, graduate degrees, things of that nature. The whole entire application process is an opportunity to highlight a lot of different things about yourself. And a lot of that is going to definitely play a role in what we're reviewing. We even talked about, I think Dean Davis would post a few comments about the holistic application review process. We're looking for that and all of that information. Again, if you have further questions, feel free to get in contact with us. And we appreciate you so much for joining us today. All right, we'll keep the conversation going, and hopefully we'll continue to see many of you in February, and then also ultimately your application and then joining the Stetson Law family. All right, thank you so much for tuning
visit.
in. Yes,
Happy holidays, everyone. Thank you.
Happy holidays. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Stetson Law Live. For your convenience, our contact information will remain on the screen for the next few minutes.